Can we just like take a second to appreciate the craft, the artistry of that, what we've just seen? So in both Illusions and America, both of you are going way back into history to kind of investigate the power of the image, that the image and cinema has to shape narratives that have real kind of profound consequences. So I'd be interested to hear you both. Maybe we can start with you, Garrett, just about coming to these projects, the genesis, the first ideas that inspired you to make this work.
Well, first I just want to thank you, Ashley and Julie, for being here and for this incredible audience. It's been really special to see that curation of work together and just how they all tie together. And
Thank you for inviting me.
It's amazing. I feel like I could go on and on about that. But so I started off, I guess, so the importance of images and the role of that. I mean, I think there's so many different entry points for how I was thinking about the work, and I think without going too long into kind of the research, I'll just sort of mention that I think that much to the quote in Illusions, that the importance of images sometimes, that those stay with us longer than text or words or facts. And so I was really interested in creating a visual chronology. So each one of these, the whole 30 minutes is actually a series of 12 vignettes that each represent a year starting in 1915, going through 1926, and are visual illustrations of history. And so to me, it was important that we illuminate those contributions that have happened, and also insert ourselves in moments where we don't necessarily see ourselves, like the Boy Scouts of America or a meteorite falling from the sky. And so that, for me, was the impetus, really, first and foremost, was like, how do we create images that will last in our mind's eye longer than anything else, and perhaps change our perception of ourselves as a result.
And also finding beauty in those moments too is important, right?
Beauty? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And intimacy.
And intimacy.
There was intimacy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think beauty is, I think that's particularly in journalism and in documentary, I think that there's a question about the role of beauty and if beauty can incite action in the same way that trauma can. And I'm very much in the camp of, yes, beauty can do that. So I think I enter my work and my process from that point of view.
So, and Julie, this is like a landmark work for you. Can you just talk about, again, coming to the project and what inspired you to make a film kind of set in wartime?
Okay. First, I'd like to give a shout out to Lynette McKee. I wish I had invited her here. She didn't. So, what was the question again?
Just coming to the project, coming up with the idea.
Oh, well, I came to it through several ways. One way was I was up late one night watching an old black and white movie, and I just swore that the person singing in the musical sounded like Ella Fitzgerald, so it was like, And so I started doing research about, the singing that was done for these movies and the tap dancing. They would have someone off into the corner adding extra tap sounds, and, in the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. And also, it was a way of kind of interrogating the whole period of the propaganda films that came out of Hollywood during World War II, because each major studio had a Signal Corps officer assigned to the studio to make these films to really keep the people, the public, motivated and happy. And whenever their times are hard or there's a depression or something, they pump out more and more musicals than they do dramas. And I wanted to have a way of inserting a black woman into that space, and I did not want her to be a tragic mulatto, so that was a challenge. So I got her in there as kind of like a spy in the House of Love, So I came to it in many ways, and plus it was my thesis film at UCLA, and I wanted to use the stage. I wanted to do a period piece, and so we did.
Which kind of leads me on to my next question. I mentioned craft of these films right up top, because I think it's really important we talk about craft and the skill that you're bringing to it. And sound is really important in both films. If either of you could talk about the sound design, and you work with Trevor Matheson on this, and the way that sound operates in Illusions is just remarkable. So either of
Well,
you
the
feel...
sound was like a character in Garrett's film. It was incredible. The sound in Illusions was, we tried to make it sound like the 1940s, and it kind of did and didn't, but it was, let's not talk about the sound. But in Garrett's film, there was so, each time it was like another character in you. It's just wonderful. It was just wonderful.
But so actually though, with the sound, with Illusions, it's funny because he was tapping his pencil on the table.
Yeah.
She was opening up the envelopes, and we couldn't hear any of that. And I thought that was something I was thinking about in Making America, was the evolution of sound in cinema, and what would it mean to make like a contemporary silent film. And so back in the day, it was like you would just hear, you just have a silent film, and then you'd have live musical accompaniment, and then you had dialogue with some music, right? And so it's actually pretty quiet. They're actually pretty quiet. And so that actually really struck me. I was like, yeah, that's so on point. Like, it's actually it's so accurate in terms of the time period that Illusions takes place in, to not hear that pencil or the envelope opening. So,
it's because we were doing it all.
but it works. It totally works. It totally makes it really catapults you into that time period. And I think that, sound plays a huge role in how we are understanding when the film is supposed to be made or what era it's supposed to be in. And nowadays you've got films that take place in the 20s, but the sound design is it's contemporary, and so it still feels like a contemporary film, And Trevor Matheson, who is part of the Black Audio Film Collective in the UK, which was in the 80s and the 90s, and a really interesting parallel being here in Brooklyn tonight to Spike Lee, and sort of like his coming up into the film industry during the exact same time period, and them making really different work. And I think it was like a beautiful moment of black cinema being something that couldn't really be defined into one aesthetic or approach or even genre. And Trevor and Jonna Comfra work very closely together, and so I had watched Looking for Langston, and this was like once the film had already been, well, I was like kind of cutting it. Kat's like, oh, you're out there. Catherine Gunn, our producer on America, is here in Album Pictures. Shout out to them. Yeah, so I was like struggling. I literally like ripped like meditation music off YouTube and just like threw it in there and was like, ugh, this is gonna work. I think maybe it wasn't really working, and I thought it would be. So I emailed Trevor because the work that he had done on Isaac's film was just so. There's something so ephemeral about it, and something so emotional.
I was very much influenced by Looking for Langston.
Yes.
On Daughters of the Dust. Yeah.
How can you talk about that? Because I'd rather hear about that right now.
No, I want to hear about yours. I want to hear about yours.
Okay, we'll get to that.
But I mean, bringing up Black Audio Film Collective is an interesting parallel with LA Rebellion. These are very collaborative movements, and Illusions was a very collaborative project as well, right?
Oh yeah, because the cinematographer was Ahmed El Manouni, and he came over from France, and so we had, it was a international crew from, and then we had, like Shigeo Suzuki doing the hair and the costumes and the makeup. It was that everyone was from all over the place.
And I think there's the kind of most obvious aesthetic, thematic parallel is between America and Illusions tonight. But let's talk about Four Women a bit as well, because in America has a very balletic quality. You have two contemporary dance performers kind of anchoring the film. But Four Women is obviously based around this extraordinary performance. I'd love to just hear you talk a bit more about it.
Oh, okay. Four Women, performed by Linda Martina Young. Very interesting how we met. She had an accident, and so she had to have emergency surgery on her knee. She had a torn meniscus. I was in the hospital at the same time having an emergency surgery on my meniscus because I was doing yoga improperly and tore my meniscus. We woke up from the surgery, looked at each other across the room, and became great friends, and that's how we conceived doing the dance film Four Women. Yes. I
think that's kind of the end of the Q&A, right?
It doesn't get any better than that,
But talk about Donna and Edward and the dance aspect of your film.
Yeah, so Edward Spots and Donna Crump, real names. classically trained ballet dancers from New Orleans. We working with them, so I wanted to try to think about the parallel to the source material from 1913 with Burt Williams, which we see excerpts of, starring Burt Williams and Odessa Gray, which is it's a love story where the sort of unexpected guy tries to get the girl and gets the girl at the end, and it's a love chase. I'm really oversimplifying the film, but I wanted to create a connection, and somewhat a narrative connection, and I also was interested, again, thinking about it being a silent film. I wanted to learn, frankly, about performance and communication without dialogue, and they really brought so much to the film. And they didn't really know each other beforehand, and so it was actually a matter of talking kind of with each scene and with each historical moment about the essence of something. So like really trying to like whittle it down to like one word or one idea, and then really letting them interpret that. And I think they did an incredible job. So it was as much a learning process for me as it was clarifying my direction on those things. Yeah.
Thanks. And before I open it up to the audience, I'll ask one more kind of broad topical question, informed really by illusions. You know, I think a lot of the time when we talk about issues around cinema, we end up only talking about representation and nothing else, which is, you know, we need to do better than that. And I think Illusions is a great example of a film which engages with power relations, executive level stuff. So I guess I'd like you to comment a little on that and maybe speak about how things are or are not changing. I know you've both worked on Queen Sugar, for example. So maybe speak a little about the landscape today, if you can. So I'd like to, big question.
Yeah, we're the Ava effect, which is a wonderful thing. I met Garrett on Queen Sugar when we were working there.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand. Can you ask it again?
Yeah.
Illusions is about more than just representation. It's about power and who has access to make, who can open the doors, who can make the work. And I'd love you to just talk about how you see the landscape today and how your work relates to that.
Okay. A lot of people thought at the time that it was just a totally self-reflective film, you know, about me, you know, saying, oh, I'm beating my head against the wall, I can't get anything done through Hollywood. But it's yes and no. It was an opportunity to express a lot of things about identity and like you said, about power and about intergroup relationships, because when Esther says, oh, they can't tell like we can, so it's kind of like a wink-wink situation. It's funny because the cycle, we've gone in a complete circle, and in many ways, you know, what was being said in Illusions 100 years ago is still happening today in the studios. It's difficult for talent to get representation. So like with the whole Leo Gaines thing, you know, you could only, it's called being in someone's pocket, you know, they're not really signed, you're not signed with an agent, but if you make some money, then they'll take the 10% and they'll maybe represent you again. It's the same thing with directors. It's film, it remains the most powerful mechanism for communicating and for turning the tide and for misinformation, as we know now with social media. So there are many, many things that remain the same as what we were talking about in Illusions back then.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that I think that we are seeing, there is sort of like I don't want to say the illusion, but doors are opening. I mean, I think what Ava's doing and what many others in different fields are doing in opening doors to have new voices, that is happening. I think that what we need to kind of figure out is that once the doors open, really truly having freedom to express yourself in a way that is authentic to you and not necessarily saying, okay, well, we're going to let you in the room, but you got to do it this way. Like that, I think that's the conversation, I think. And I think actually like this program, this whole week is a great example of another way in which you make work, but then it's like, well, but how long is it? And the length and somehow the amount of time qualifying the value of the work is like dinosaur thinking. It's like totally insane. And I think I thank you guys for allowing, again, like something to get broken and kind of put back together in a better way.
Thanks both. At this point, I'd like to open it up to the audience. We'll go with you in the cab. So the question is just to get you both to reflect on the use of archetypes in your work and how you can kind of create new imagery by cutting together in different ways.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned with archetypes as I am with tropes. Archetypes is kind of Jungarian, and you could say it's the equivalent of the Greco-Roman mythology, you know, with Zeus and Venus and all of that. So I could function and work and maneuver within the archetypes, but it's the tropes and the stereotypes that are problematic for me. And I'm over that illusions phase right now. I'm working on a biopic about Angela Davis, and then another biopic about Mahalia Jackson. And so something that you just said is very important. It's like once you get in the room, what happens? And that's what I'm struggling with right now. You get the job and you're in the room, and they see the project quite different than what you see, because they bring their own experiences and their history, and it's like, whoa. Sometimes it's just like very, very different from what you know.
Yeah, I think I would answer that in terms of iconography, because I think I was really interested in trying to think about the icons that we see when we think about America, and I think like the Boy Scouts of America, for instance, being a really good example. I wanted people to be able to pause the film at any point, and it could explain kind of everything about those 30 minutes, you know? I wanted everything to be embedded in each one of the images. I wanted it to also be something that could become a new symbol, like you could put it on a cereal box, you know, or you could put it on a billboard or something. And so I wasn't, and that's also why I called it America, and that's something that we like kind of internally went back and forth about, like what the title was going to be, because it's sort of like, fuck, like calling something America is like kind of a big deal, you know what I mean? You can't just like have a shitty film and call it America, or you could actually. I guess you totally could do that. But I didn't want to make a shitty film, and so, but I was thinking about like it going on the internet and how, when you make something and then there's press and it goes out into the world, and I was like, well, this is a perfect opportunity to attach new images to that word,
Yes.
and new forms of symbolism and the white sheet. I think the film starts in 1915, which was tied to the KKK and the Birth of a Nation, which is when that film came out, and thinking about the different ways in which one object like the white sheet changes its meaning and power depending on who's holding it and how it's being assembled, and seeing sort of 3 iterations of that. So, I was kind of thinking about it in the big picture, and I guess, bit by bit, and all the little ones.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So the first question is to Julie about how do you feel about America, and then for Garrett, it's about how you reflect on America in today's climate.
America, it was very hypnotic, and it just pulled me into almost like a dream state, like a meditation of mindfulness and reimagining America, reimagining things that I thought I knew and had seen before. Some things I recognized, some things I did not recognize, but it was presented in such a provocative and engaging way, and the camera angles, the framing, and the lens choices were so beautiful that it was breathtaking in many, many ways. And I was just like, it was just like an emotional roller coaster, up and down and up. And each iteration of each moment that passed, it was becoming more and more and more of something that was reimagining and redefining America. So it was lovely. It was wonderful.
Seeing actually I will get to answering your question, but seeing 4 women, I felt the same thing, just how, and it made me actually wonder if you chose the song first, and then, kind of assembled it to that, or if you put the song in after?
The song first.
Yeah.
Hearing the song, growing up, everybody hears a song for all women, and then it was like, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to. Well, actually, there was a lecture when I was a student at AFI, that's American Film Institute, and the lecturer was talking about if you're ever going to take on a song or photograph artwork, you have to transcend what the singer's performing or what the artwork, the painted work is. So I love challenges, and so it was a challenge to take that on and transcend it in a different way.
Yeah. So I mean, watching it, I wanted to sit in tonight to watch it with everybody, but since it's been screening, I don't sit and watch it anymore. But I think now I'm like, oh man, like the sound design, like there's all these things I still want to do to it. I'm like, like that totally would include like right there, and so I don't know. I get like a little heady when I rewatch stuff. It's hard for me to kind of remove myself from my work. I don't feel like I mean, I hope that outside of myself and my own like type A-ness about the making of something. I don't know how you feel when you watch your own work, if it's just like excruciating.
I usually try not to watch it
it's
because
like kind
it's
of intense.
nerve-wracking, because you see all the errors, like even the darn titles were out of focus. It's like, it was like, oh God, then you remember you're in a little room by yourself pressing out the titles. We had to do everything, and it was like, I spelled Navajo wrong in the telegram, and so it's like, oh my God, I hope no one knows. So yeah, it's painful in a way that your film work is like a relative or an old friend. It's like you don't want to revisit it too often.
Yes, exactly.
I have a question for Ms. Julie Dash. Seeing that this film is about a black woman and her experience in the film industry, even so far back, I'm so curious to know what that has been like for you in terms of how it was in your 20s, in your 30s, now, and just what is it to your spirit, and how you took every situation to maneuver different things and hustle in different ways because of those limitations.
Okay, that's a great question. Long one. So, right after I made Illusions in the 80s, I was being courted by all of the film companies, the studios. Mainly, they wanted to know how I made it on such a low budget and how I was able to have a production design like that. And they were curious, but they passed on everything that I pitched to them. And that went on for many, many years. And I said, well, I'm just going to go ahead and do Daughters of the Dust. And I did. I had pitched that to them, too. And they said, oh, that's been done before. So it was like, okay, all right. And in the 90s, after Daughters came out, once again, I made the rounds, and I had an agent at that time. They pretty much wanted to assign me to every film that had a Ku Klux Klan member in it. They thought that they could take me and just attach me to another script, to another film, to tell the story that they wanted to tell. And it was like, but I don't want to tell that story. So I didn't work very much, but I did a lot of television work. I did a lot of commercials and music videos, and that's the way it's been. I recently got reassigned to some new feature films, but that's kind of what I'm going through once again. It's they have grand ideas, but the film that they want to see is not necessarily the film that needs to be made, and they don't exactly have their fingers on the pulse of what's happening out in the world. Yeah.
Thank you. How did you communicate with the performers? Tell them what was good, what was bad? How were you directing with the actors?
I never say that was good or that was bad. I do say it was good. I never say like that was bad. I think it's and I, you know, as when you're directing actors, I think it can be in a silent space, you know, without dialogue. There wasn't really a right and a wrong, actually. I mean, there were so many. I was like shot listing so heavily, and I was thinking so much about the camera work and where the camera was and what the angle was. So it's more about like controlling everything as much as possible, so that then everything can kind of lose control in front of the camera, as opposed to trying to control the people in front of the camera. You know, I don't.
It just seemed like the performances were so tailored to whatever you wanted. Like you seemed like you
Yeah.
whatever you wanted. I was just don't know how.
I think that.
How they knew.
Yeah, I think that that's because when you, and that's communication. I think directing is it's mostly just communication. It's learning how to speak multiple languages to different people who are all there, making everybody feel comfortable and clear about what the vision is. And so I think when people are in front of the camera, it's such a vulnerable space, and you have to be really careful about what you're communicating. And I think you don't want to communicate too much so that they think they have to think about that. You just want to let them understand. So what I would say specifically is like, this is a 50 millimeter lens. This is the frame right here. So think about this world. Don't worry about necessarily what your feet are doing unless you feel like your feet are going to help you do what's going on up here. You know? And I think that then gave them some parameters to work with.
Thank you.
This is just sort of a follow-up to that, and was the direction the same working with the children on set? What was that experience like?
Yeah, those were students of mine, and they made their own films, so they knew what the frame sizes were. And yeah, and they, you know, they were learning too. I mean, I think that was the beauty of the whole process of how we made the film, was that it was fully local cast and crew and a lot of people who were related to each other and knew each other, and it was a learning experience for everybody just as much, you know. And I think that that's like in the film industry, I think being like on set with Ava's crew was wonderful, and it was special because it was like the like douchebaggy like union vibe, like just it wasn't, yeah, like there just was a certain precedent that's set when you diversify your space. It's like not really about being politically correct. It's like, how do you actually just make better work, you know?
Why black and white?
Because it's sexy. It's so cool. No, I mean, I was trying to think in terms of the constraints of the time period from the turn of the century, from all the films that I had looked at the Library of Congress that were under black cinema, and thinking about the formal constraints of that. And originally we had thought about like using like an old camera from that time period and lenses, and then I was like, no, like it's cool, like let's just, yeah, like we can do so much more with newer technology. But but working on film and in black and white film, it was actually less about the aesthetic. It was more about the fact that the film canister lasts 500 years, you know, like there's no other format in the world right now, no hard drive that you can buy or anything that will last that long. So it was all about how to create an archive and how to respond to the things that are missing.
And this whole history of race films is incredible. I recommend, there's a box set that Kino Lorber put out recently working with the Library of Congress called Pioneers of African American Cinema, and it's like dozens and dozens of these really unique, interesting, unclassifiable films. We're showing two with America on Tuesday. One's called Hellbound Train, which was by a husband and wife filmmaking team called James and Eloise Gist, who used to tour their films around churches. And this one is a film about a train going to hell, hence Hellbound Train.
It's crazy.
On every carriage is like a different vice. So if you've ever wanted to see somebody get murdered by jazz, literally, this is the film for you. We've got time for one more question before we wrap up tonight. I'm going to go right to the back, because you had your hand up before. So this is maybe about the choice of the shot with the white filmmaker looking straight down the camera, and maybe just elaborate a little on the Lime Kiln Club Field Day.
Yeah, so that film was made in 1913, which was several years after Plessy versus Ferguson, which was sort of the beginning of Jim Crow tightening its grip on the country. It was also the same year as the modern day projector, so people for the first time could watch films together in the same space. So there was this very strange togetherness and separation happening simultaneously. So the fact that they found that the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, found this film as a series of unassembled outtakes, they put a lot of incredible resources into reassembling it and figuring out what the narrative was, and they included every take. You know, that's why you see, or you actually, this is not, we didn't watch the whole film tonight, I forgot, but you see multiple takes of it. And so it was really significant. So this was what they think to be the very first film with an integrated production and all-black cast, starring Burt Williams, who had made 3 films, I think, but was making more money than the president during his time. And yes, was wearing blackface, but very much so that he was sort of taking on that burden so that those around him didn't have to do that. And I think you can see it's sort of a very rare and extraordinary example of joy and leisure and people looking amazing. I mean, the band kind of coming around the corner and all those dresses that the women are wearing, it's like beautiful. And so the reason why I found that image particularly interesting to end with was these moments of intimacy that you see, these interracial forms of intimacy in a professional space. So what really struck me was one of the actors grabbing the other guy's arm. And sort of the playfulness and laughter that you can see in between the takes of the film. Then there's another guy who's staring straight at us, which is very much, I don't know, to me is sort of like looking into the future, looking at us, thinking it's a challenge on some level. So I held on the image for a variety of reasons, but I think those being mainly why.
That's a great answer to a great question. Thank you all for being here. Please give it up for Julie and Garrett.